Epilogue. When she opened her eyes, it was raining softly outside her window. A breeze carrying the scent of wet earth came in to mingle with the scent of sun-dried cotton sheets. She inhaled, smiling, and a joyful, ear-splitting trill sounded from around her feet. When she sat up, Kitten leaped forward to strike her chest, almost knocking her back down. "Easy, Kit, easy," she protested, laughing. "Calm down." Zek jumped onto the bed and came to curl up on the girl's shoulder. "So you're awake." Alana came over to the bed. "How do you feel?" "Rested. Cuddling Dragon and Marmoset." Dane frowned. "Weren't you shipped back home?" "We were called back. You were busy to some purpose here, youngling." Dane had the grace to blush and look down. "I lost my temper. And the gods did the rest. At least you're alive and well after such an experience." "Is Karthik still going to war against us?" Alana shook her head. "Kadar's, the Emperor's, ministers are signing the treaty with Duke Gareth today. Not that the army of the North could march in any case. They seem to have run out of supplies that are fit to use." She lifted an eyebrow at Dane, who blushed again. Alana filled her in as the girl cleaned her teeth and dressed. She had slept for 4 days, and they were in guest quarters at the university. At first they had gone to Kadar's mother's house. That had lasted until the princess learned the full story of the events at the palace. Once the word got out, nothing the new emperor could say would convince her or her servants that Dane, asleep in the women's quarters, would not pull the villa down around her ears. "That's what they'll think back home too, isn't it?" asked Dane. Alana handed the girl some breeches. "Not necessarily. See, youngster, it's a good thing that all this happened in Karthik. By the time those in Tortle hear the tale, they'll think it's just a tale." "Really?" Dane asked, clinging to her friend's hand. "They won't shun me like the servants and the princess and all?" "Trust me, there will always be some who dislike you, but that's life." "Over this business?" The champion grinned. "People like to hear tales of things in distant realms, but they never believe them. There might be strangeness at first, but you'll be surprised how quickly they forget." Dane rested her head on the woman's shoulder. "Good," she whispered. "I don't like the person I've been here." Alana held her. "No one can refuse a god." Her voice was kind. "It's over, and you're the same person you've always been. Once you're home, it will seem like a tale even to you." The next day, in a break between rains, she and Numer were sitting in a garden, watching Bone Dancer, Kitten, and Zek play with brightly colored stones, when Alana brought Kadar to them. He smiled hesitantly as the girl and Numer got to their feet. "May I talk with you briefly?" he asked Dane. "I won't take much of your time." "Take all you want, your imperiousness," she replied with a grin, patting the chair next to hers. "Here, laddie-buck," Alana told Numer. "You come with me." The tall mage sighed, but didn't argue. The champion led him back into the house. "Sit, please, Dane. I know you haven't been up very long." Kadar joined her. The new emperor was dressed simply, as he'd been on his tours with her. The only changes she saw were a gold sunburst ring on his left index finger, and an air of purpose. For a moment, they watched the animals play. "What about Lyndall's bone?" he asked. "The other dinosaurs you woke have vanished, but he's still here." "I don't know," Dane admitted. "It seems to be up to Bone." Bone Dancer looked up at them and nodded, a trick he'd learned from Kitten. "This is the first time I've seen him away from Lyndall. He must like you." Kadar looked at his hands. "They'll be going north too, it seems." "Numer mentioned it." "I'm sorry," she told him. "I know you'll miss Lyndall." "I offered all I could to get him to stay. Gold, books, a menagerie like your king is building, head of the university, orders of the School of Magecraft. He says he's born it here as long as he can. He wants to go north where he won't see another slave." He laughed shortly. "It seems his only reason for staying this long was to help runaways out of the country." "Are you surprised?" Dane asked. "No, not really. I had my suspicions all along. I just wish he could stay. I trust him. I don't know about some of these other people, particularly the ministers who serve my uncle." "Can't you get rid of them?" Kadar shook his head. The country's already in turmoil. I need to keep a few of the same faces around, at least until I get their measure. It doesn't sound like much fun. I wish you luck with it. I'll need luck. Kadar took her hand. Dane, I found my uncle's papers. He was going to have me arrested and charged with conspiring against him, which means he planned to have me killed. I owe you my life. I know this will sound trite, but I mean it. Whatever you want that I can give, even to half of my kingdom, all you need do is ask. Dane gave him a skeptical look. Your ministers wouldn't like the half-kingdom part. He grinned. Actually, they want to arrest you for crimes against the state. Me? It will take a year just to figure out how much we lost. We have to do a census now, and draw up new records and tax rolls for every part of the empire. Dane whistled, impressed. He went on, What amazes me is that creatures dead long before man ever walked the earth, fixed on the treasury and the imperial records, where they could do the most damage. We'll never replace it all, and what we do replace will cost a fortune. She fingered the badger's claw around her neck. I had help, she reminded him. Yes, but haven't you seen how often people look for someone to blame? Not to find a way to keep some bad thing from repeating itself, just to blame. Send them to the graveyard hag, Dane suggested impishly. She'll set them straight. Kadar shuddered. My blood runs cold at the very thought. He squeezed her hand. I mean what I say. I want to reward you, so think fast. Your ship sails at dawn. I know you've no family or home of your own, so shall it be gold or jewels? My own wealth was invested here in the city, and there are imperial treasures all over the empire. We may not have a palace, but neither are we poor. Name your desire. She stared at the dragon, marmoset, and skeleton. Bone had discovered a puddle to splash in. I want some humans, slaves, to be freed, with enough in their purses to start a new life. A good life, with work they enjoy, the chance to buy apprenticeships for their children, and proper clothes and food and such. If they want to return to Tortle with us, they can. All these things for others? Nothing for yourself? No, Kadar. The graveyard hag did most of this, not me. Use whatever you might have given me to help them that suffered in your famine. He looked her in the eyes for a moment and saw that she meant it. Name these people, then. The Banjiku, all of them, please, and their animals. And the Emperor's mutes. The mutes? She nodded. But they're useful. And since they're mute already... Dane stared at him. The Emperor sighed. Very well. I have to bustle if they're to leave tomorrow. As he tried to get up, Dane held him back. Kadar, it's not my place to criticize the way you live, but if I were you, I'd think about your slaves. Animals endure cages if they must, but not two-leggers. If your slaves ever think to break out, it'll make what I did look like mud pies. He sat down again. It would beggar the Empire if we freed them. No one could pay wages to so many when they pay only for room and board now. My nobles would rise against me. Even my soldiers would rebel, thinking the freed slaves would attack and their homes and families would be in danger. I know it'd be hard, but please think about it. If you whip an animal long enough, it turns on you. If all the world were slave, I don't know if it would be so dangerous, but all they need to do is look across the inland sea to know that life doesn't have to be like this. To her surprise, he lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it. I will think about it. I promise. At dawn, she stood on one of the ships that would convey the now much larger Tortlan party north to Chorus, the Tortlan capital. Their small convoy would raise anchor once the Banjiku and their animals boarded Dane's ship. The mutes, those who had chosen to come, were already aboard another vessel. To Dane's surprise, half of them had chosen to stay behind. Talking in sign language to Numer, they had explained that they preferred to stay with the life they knew. Emperor Kadar would be far kinder than his uncle, they were sure, and Karthik was their home. When's the coronation? She asked Kadar, who had come to see them off. Numer, standing nearby, picked up Kitten, trying to pretend he wasn't listening. Full moon, the young man said. I wish you could be there. I don't, grumbled Numer. Dane kicked him gently. You'll write? asked Kadar, turning to go. The Bandicoot had finished boarding. You promise? All right, she replied. The early fog had burned off at last, giving her a clear view of the palace. While some parts remained as they had been, she saw plenty of cracked and broken walls. The upper reaches were scarred by flame and soot. Of its 5 towers, only 3 remained standing. She also saw one more thing. Your Imperial Majesty? Kadar! On the dock, he looked up at her. Yes? About the palace? I wouldn't rebuild over there if I were you. You're going to have a dreadful problem with pests, and no dogs or cats will stay in it. The captain shouted the order to cast off. She waved cheerfully. Pests? Kadar glanced across the river. The entire slope between palace and water was covered with rats. It's ours now, they thought to Dane. It's only fitting, she told them, and waved goodbye. Thunder rolled softly overhead as, once more, it began to rain.